Welcome to Neurotypicals Don't Juggle Chainsaws, the podcast that cuts through the rubbish to explore the world of neurodiversity. I'm your host, Nic King.
And I'm your host, Kate Fox, and together we're here to explore, understand and celebrate being neurodivergent in a neurotypical world. From ADHD and autism to dyslexia and other quirky brains, we talk about it all.
And go off on tangents. So whether you're neurodivergent, love someone who is, or you're just curious about neurodivergent minds, you are in the right place.
Let's get ready to juggle some words and maybe even a few chainsaws, metaphorically, of course.
Welcome back to another episode of Neurotypicals Don't Juggle Chainsaws. Post David and Tanya and pre-autism level up next week. It's busy.
It's all going on.
So
we've meerkatted and we've monitor upped and we've absorbed whole new ways of being. But Nick, you have got something. Oh, who are we, by the way? We should always introduce ourselves just in case we forget.
I mean, I don't know who. No, who am I? I am Nic King, and she's Nick Fox.
Did you say Nick Fox?
Have we blended? Have we merged? Is this when you name? I keep seeing pandas and foxes in places together, which I think is a very odd combination.
I know you sent me I haven't responded to it yet. I'll respond to it now. You sent me a picture of a fox and a panda and a hare in a balloon together. I wanted to say, actually, I felt like what would happen in that combination, the hare would be mischievous and sort of snip through the balloon wires with its sharp, pointy teeth. What I thought, but if that combination, I think the fox and panda would be quite well behaved in the balloon. Anyway, I suppose that's actually, as it turns out, maybe a sort of illustration of the theme of today's podcast in a weird sort of way. Go on, tell us, Nick.
There is something, and it's one of those things that's perpetuated through like training for many, many years. So, and it just seems inherent in often many, many discussions that you have with many, many people, particularly many, many professionals, which is all behaviour is communication. And I want to put it in the bin.
Okay, so tell me what are they meaning by that in the context that they exist in, and why are you wanting to put it in the bin?
So what they mean is that you can look at another human being and understand them and then make judgments about what they are doing because they are communicating something, which might be true. They might be communicating something, but you are perpetually and always will take that through a lens of your own personal experience. So fundamentally, all behaviour is open to interpretation.
And I'm guessing that what we have here is professionals who are not autistic looking at autistic children mainly in this context, or people for whom the professionals are in some care type capacity, and they're going, don't worry everyone, I've got this. I totally understand what the behaviour of this person is communicating. And then they have missed out the bit where they've forgotten that we need to apply the double empathy problem, or remember that it exists. And often we are failing, as if we are non-autistic people, to properly empathise. Can you give me a concrete example then of an all behaviour is communication type situation? What's the person looking at and what are they getting wrong?
I am going to use an example that I quite regularly use, and am I going to swear? We might use the F word. And it's called the Fuck the Wiggle story. Okay.
Oh, here for this. Go on.
Okay. Now this is something that was shared by a young autistic man called Jake Reisman, and he was a self-advocate. And this is going back to the Star Institute's virtual summit in 2021. And this story has stuck with me and I have shared it in all sorts of spaces. So Jake is now a young adult. He very much he presents non-verbally. He uses an AAC device. He has a lot of sort of movement. He does a lot of rocking. He makes a lot of vocalizations, and a lot of his behavior is very, very open to interpretation. When he was young, his parents, as as we as we do, well, we put them in front of Peppa Pig, we put them in front of Bluey. His parents put him in front of the Wiggles. Now, for context, the Wiggles are an Australian band who play some incredibly annoying music. Sorry, the Wiggles. Don't tag them. Um, and Jake showed some behaviour which was interpreted as happiness by his parents, not even necessarily a professional, by his parents. His parents interpreted his behavior in that moment of sort of like flapping and rocking and that kind of thing as something that he was enjoying. And Jake got bought Wiggles merchandise, Wiggles DVDs, Wiggles calendars. Wiggles became part of his life and he was put in front of it for several hours of the day. And when he eventually got to the point where he was given his own method of communication in terms of an AAC device, one of the first things that he wrote on it was "fuck the Wiggles."
So all that time,
All that time.
gosh, torture. Poor
God.
Jake.
And like, it obviously, it didn't come from a bad place. It was just a fundamental misinterpretation of his communication.
And actually, so for me, I'm gonna translate this into an instance from my own life that I remember from when I was very young. So I must have had, I probably still have, some sort of habit of kind of staring off into space in what people might interpret as well, either a joyous trance of entrancement and attention, or as being bored shitless. And it depends on your position. So, my English teacher, who loved me, thought I was the best thing that ever happened, saw me doing this fugue state stare at, I actually can't remember what it was, but it was kind of, I was quite interested in whatever the thing was. And she was like, oh, she said something like, you're so thoughtful, something like that. And the reason I've remembered this is because not long after that, my Girl Guide leaders, who hated me because I always forgot my. Have we talked about Girl Guides before? Torture for autistic girls, in my case, anyway. Like I forgot to bring my badge, or to polish it with brass ore. That's what you had to do with Girl Guide badges in the day. Polish it with. I couldn't tie my tie thing, neckerchief, and I don't think that's totally why they hated me. It might have been more because I went through a period of rampant atheism and refused to do the being in favour of God and the Queen in the circle thing. Anyway, I was quite an annoying force in Girl Guides, in summary. And I was doing the stare at the Commonwealth Games, which we'd been taken to, and someone was running. And I was probably neither entranced nor bored. I was just staring, really, to be honest. But the Girl Guide leader was like, "Oh, well, you look really bored." And I was thinking, then I was like, hang on, this is the same look I had when Mrs. Hunter said that I was so thoughtful. And I realised in that moment, I think grown-ups don't always get what you're doing and why you're doing it. Although I was then still vulnerable in adult life, as many of us are, to if I'm not always completely in touch with what my externals are saying or doing, because I'm not always in control of my expressions or how people interpret them or my body language or whatever. Sometimes I have been vulnerable to thinking, oh, well, they've said that I am conveying this, like when people have sometimes thought I'm angry if I'm not, and vice versa. And then I've thought, oh, maybe they're right. Maybe they're seeing something in my behavior that I'm not seeing. Even though I had that very vivid example when I was young of, no, it's open to interpretation. So,
I have a very, very cross concentrating face. Like I'm not saying it doesn't look angry. It does look angry, but that doesn't mean I'm angry. I mean, I might be angry that I'm having to reread a sentence 3 times because like dyslexia, but like that doesn't mean I'm like cross with other people. But I was aware, particularly when I used to do that sort of office work thing, like I look cross, but that doesn't mean I am cross.
And it's interesting because culturally, we now have a phrase that people can use and do use sometimes to address this if they know it about themselves. So they might say, "Don't mind me, I have resting bitch face." And resting bitch face can be quite useful as a phrase. It's not one that I have sort of, I think I
Directed
have.
at me.
Yeah, well, yeah, at least then if you can, or you can say, oh, I have it. Yeah, it doesn't, I have resting gormless face, to be honest. I think, oh,
Oh
that's not
no,
very nice, is
that's
it?
a
That was
bad
like,
word.
sorry, that is, isn't it? That was my mum. Oh, okay. We
Oh,
can unpack this moment. There's another phrase that I think is my mum as well. I'm neither use nor ornament. Um, I know I did. She
no.
was from Yorkshire and she had quite a lot of internalized stuff around her own. Fairly sure she was autistic. We can't diagnose her because she's no longer with us, but she was autistic. And yeah, the combination of autistic from Yorkshire of a certain age, she was quite harsh. So, okay, so I have to take that back then, not a gormless.
No.
Okay, but I think
But I
go
do
on.
think that the thing that you're talking about with your body language is open to interpretation. And when I originally met you, because you were on a stage, I assumed you were struggling with the light and that
Oh.
it was a bit bright. But that isn't the case because that is just how your body language is in various settings.
Exactly. There's not a phrase for that, unfortunately. The don't mind me. I just have struggling with the light body. It's not a thing. Quakers would probably quite like that. It sounds quite poetic. So can you oh, okay, we can have this moment, I think. So I am aware that I have sort of some distinct body and facial language, but I don't really know what that is. I occasionally, in fact, someone just sent me a video uh, yesterday of a part of a gig that I did, and they were like, "Oh, I thought you might like to see this." And I've restrained myself from writing, "No, there is nothing less I would like to see than the external me that others see, which doesn't resemble the internal me that I see and imagine. Nothing less at all. I'd rather poke my eyes out with a, you know, the sharp, scratchy, pointy thing. Anyway, so in summary, but go on, but, and I was aware recently, someone who has been a guest on our show actually, but I'll not share because it's not their story, as in it is their story, not my story. But they said when they walked into a room and me and another autistic woman were there, seeing how we moved was one of the things that told them or it was a bit of a revelation for them of hang on, I'm not just separate from this stuff. Maybe I am it. So, struggling with the light body, what is that like?
What, like as an experience or as attempting to interpret it?
Yeah, exactly.
Um, so initially, like attempting to interpret it, I assumed bright light. I assumed that I was making too much eye contact that possibly made you uncomfortable after I figured out that it wasn't light when I started to see you in other like places. That I don't know. I think I've just sort of gotten used to it, and I think I have a similar tell in that when I am thinking, I'm very aware that I look off into like the corner of my eye, and that is my thinking face. And then when I'm done thinking, I will then probably look at somebody's face and yeah, sort of wait for them to talk. But yeah, I assumed too much light and I assumed too much eye contact, or possibly like just too physically close to you. I
Mm.
don't think any of those are true now. And it isn't how I understand your body language or your body language communication to be now at all. Um, I tell you what, though, I think being like constantly on Zoom's done me the world of good, like since COVID. I think having that visual there to look back and refer to has actually been quite, I don't want to say that I like a mask at work because that's not quite what it is, but there is a level of sort of like professionalism context switching where I can't sit there and deliver training and just look cross. Um, it's not a good sales tactic. That's not the ideal. And it's also like it's not what I want to deliver. Do you know what I mean? I do like delivering sort of a level of joy, even in a level of discomfort. If there's a topic you would like us to explore, let us know. You can do that via our website, Neurotypicals Don't Juggle Chainsaws. You will also find a PayPal link there where you could leave us a little financial tip, and your support really helps keep us going. Yeah, being on Zoom a lot's really sort of like helped me with that. And I think the interpretations of my face are often interesting. But there's the other thing as well, you know how you're like, I don't want to watch that thing back. I sometimes like I get my social media sort of like reels and stuff like that, and I'm like, what is my face doing? Like, what is my face doing? And and I don't I just like I like to think I have a level of control over it, but I also think I'm slightly disillusioned.
Well, in that case, if we were rewriting the all behavior is communication rule, and I suppose that we've kind of, as it's turned out in the conversation, been focusing on kind of gestures, body language, facial expressions, because of course there are other types of behavior. So it sounds like not only is all behavior open to interpretation, but it does sound like actually over time you may, if you get to know someone across different contexts, and if you get to communicate with them about their experience, then behavior might become more accurate communication, but even then it's not guaranteed.
No, and I think it's about building safe relationships and getting to know people, isn't it? Like I work with somebody and I know if they show up to work wearing a certain item of clothing, they're not okay. And like
Mm.
we don't even need to talk about it. Like I know they're not all right. I know they're having a hard day, and I actually know that they might not want to talk about it immediately before we start work, and it's possibly something to do afterwards rather than before. And I think sometimes it's just asking, "You're wearing a hat today," and I was like, "Hat? What's with the hat?"
It turns out it just, well, I had to get up early actually and do another podcast, in fact, about Northern voices. And I was like, oh, I could get up even earlier and have a shower and do my hair, or I could just put a hat on. So, yes.
And this is the thing, and obviously we have a level of privilege in that we have like knowledge about our needs and we have safe relationships that they can be shared between. And I think one of the reasons that I tend to talk a lot about body language, particularly in terms of all behaviours communication, is because that is such a significant amount of our communication. And it also it removes that thing whether we are always verbal, always speaking, or always non-verbal and non-speaking. It removes that because there's the other hill I will die on, which is particularly with young people where it goes, they have to tell us what's wrong. I mean, that can go jump off the ledges, like that can go in the bin.
Yeah.
Also in the bin. Don't be
Yeah.
asking people with the communication disability to communicate about their disability before they have a level of self-understanding and you've established yourself as a safe person. Just, oh, honestly, endless rants are available about this. It does. It's one of the reasons that polar bear in my neurobears is a polar bear because polar bears aren't white.
Oh, as in because their skin underneath is pink.
It's actually black.
Oh, oh, that's it. That's like when I misremember jokes. I was like, I must remember a polar bear's skin is not the colour you would expect. They've still forgotten the colour. So go on, say more. So they're
So
not.
yeah, so polar bears, one, skin's black underneath their fur, but their fur isn't white either. Their fur is translucent. It reflects the light, it reflects their environment. So like it's open to interpretation through your sight because it is only reflecting light. I mean, I know obviously all colours are a reflection of light, but it is in fact translucent. And also it appears that polar bears also like understand that they're not white. So like if they want to hide themselves in the wild, they cover their nose with their paws because they know their nose is black.
Wow.
You say?
That is, oh, that's so cute. A little polar bear covering their nose.
But
I
they're
want
still
to,
gonna eat you.
oh, okay. Oh, well, I want to see them do that from a safe distance while holding a weapon. But yes, I wonder if it's interesting. I'm thinking of, I'm thinking about how often people have said to me recently that my voice is very calming, which
Mm.
is nice and useful, given that I often use my voice in my. But I'm presuming that my body language and facial expressions are often not calming. And I'm not saying that I'm in any way compensating, definitely not. But except maybe, I think maybe I am subconsciously compensating, kind of, maybe, possibly, maybe.
I think you like, I mean, everybody does a level of context switching. So when I see you when you are at work, not like when we're working together, but when you are like at work, when you are standing in front of an audience, you have a stance. You have a stance that you have planned. And I know that. And like you have a different body language, but I can also, because I know you, I can see you being mindful of it, but I don't necessarily think other people see that. And initially, before I knew you properly, I didn't see that either. Um, but there's a context switching thing as well, isn't there? And
Mm.
then people often make, and it's different masking, it's different, that you have a level where you have to behave a certain way at work or in public. Unfortunately. Um, so I think, yes, I think your body language is slightly different and possibly within the realms of what you would expect for your job, in that, you stand in front of a microphone with a sort of shoulder wide stance. But I can see that it's been considered. I can
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's an attempt to ground and be grounded. But it's now unconscious. It was considered at one point and is now unconscious. So I suppose, yes, without wanting to make it about me, but what I'm realizing in all behavior is communication. It's doubly problematic because if we're talking in the context of primarily autistic, but also ADHD people, not only is that behavior open to interpretation and quite likely to be misinterpreted by somebody who's maybe looking for generic cues or is using neurotypical body language as their baseline. But if people are not really in control always of what their behavior actually is, then they definitely are not using it to communicate. Like, it's very a body, a body and a face, right? That's a lot of thing to coordinate all at once. There's a lot of moving parts here, operating in an environment that changes and shifts, with a brain that's doing a lot of things. A lot of coordination is what I'm saying, and a lot of things just happen either
Oh.
automatically or unconsciously or in response to a sensory cue often that may not be evident to somebody who is not experiencing that sensory cue.
And I think we make so many assumptions based on behaviors. I was talking to somebody the other day, and this is back to another training thing that's like completely perpetuated and is sort of now like just Is endemic the word? I don't know. We'll pick a word. Anyway, I'm sure every parent of the autistic child out there will have seen the behaviour iceberg. And that starts with something like, you know, the idea that we're all a calm sea until this iceberg happens, and then there's an incident that happens, and then there's an escalation, and then there's like some sort of behavior crisis point, and then we immediately go down like everybody's the Titanic or something. Like we're not. We're, we're just not. And this is the thing. This is the other problem with sort of that this idea of behavior is that quite often when we're saying all behaviors communication, everybody's encouraged to look at like the previous 5 seconds before the behavior happened or the previous like 5 minutes when human beings are so much more complicated than that.
Yeah. So actually, it sounds like going back many years to my social psychology degree, that is a behaviourist view, as in, so behaviourists thought there will be a stimulus of some sort, and then there will be a response, and you can kind of really easily see a line between stimulus and response, and you could change stimulus and change response. And wow, if there's anything neurodivergent people are not and do not do, it's operating a line from a thing to a thing. I mean, it's non-linear cobweb branches going off everywhere, really. Not that we're therefore impossible to interpret or communicate with. We're not, but it can take a little bit more effort and complexity.
It's often in the nuance, though, isn't it? It's often in the little things, these ideas that, like, I mean, we were out somewhere the other day and, the fire alarm test was due. It was on the wall. It was 15 minutes late. Can you imagine how annoyed I was? Um, but, like, that's going to be a trigger. That's going to, like, take you up. That in terms of behavior, you're going to see people with, their hands over their knees. This was a children's ward for context, people. And like, that it's not going to be pleasant and it's going to be painful and you're going to sort of show that. But what you might not necessarily see is, in terms of body language, in that like anxiety before. So it was advertised for 10:30, went off at 10:46. And then like you thought it was done, but then it went off again, and that was worse. Um, and then that sort of that anxiety building up, and then that sort of like weird cuspy state where you were like, is it not happening then? Is it going to happen? And then it happened, and then it happened again, and then just that sort of, but then is it going to happen again? And this idea that, that there's this escalation point and then down again. And obviously, yeah, you're right, behaviorism, and it's so ingrained in all of our systems for how, and parents they're constantly encouraged, and professionals are constantly encouraged to interpret like young people's behavior as well, and very little room for like reflection on the lens that we're putting it through.
Yeah. And actually, I kind of want to be optimistic around that, but I think reflection around lenses, time for reflection, belief in the value of reflection is still kind of a minority pursuit, especially in big systems like education and health. And so that means those of us who are aware of the need for that reflection, um, are essentially speaking against the tide, but are really important voices in that case, encouraging that sort of reflection so that people are not in future forced to sit in front of terrible Australian children's pop bands that they actually hate.
Thanks for tuning in to Neurotypicals Don't Juggle Chainsaws. We're so glad you joined us today to explore the fascinating world of neurodivergence with your hosts, me, Nic King.
And me, Kate Fox. If our conversation sparked a thought, a question, or even a smile, don't keep it to yourself. Drop us a line at hello@neurotypicals.don't juggle chainsaws.co.uk, or visit our website neurotypicals.don't juggle chainsaws.co.uk to write in. We'd love to hear from you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, consider leaving us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast platform.
Until next time, keep embracing the unique ways you juggle the chainsaws of life.